And my friend Chip Patterson is waiting to talk about these and other matters of the college football experience, and he joins us, as he always does, on Wednesday. How are you, sir?
I'm terrible at blackjack.
I'm bad at blackjack. I don't play.
I don't do the numbers, so I don't win. I'm all on vibes. You know, what are my vibes? What are the dealers' vibes? What is the table feeling? You know, because I realize that too much focus on the numbers will have you in your head, and then guess what that means? Bad vibes. And you're never going to win with bad vibes. So I might make everyone else at the table so angry.
Yes, you would.
Where I might have violence inflicted upon me, or at least the threat of it. But that's why I'm a bad blackjack player. And honestly, I'm not above or too good for just sitting down at the video blackjack for the sole reason that I'm not going to make somebody else angry, and I can just sit there and play cards and lose slowly.
See, I don't like casino games. I have been to Vegas. Like, I don't like casino games. I don't want to play cards. I don't want to play roulette. I'd play craps. You need a lot of.
I like craps.
If you have, like, I'm not saying you need a lot of money, but that's the game that gives you your best odds.
Correct.
You have a better chance to win money at craps. And by the way, the casinos also do well on craps, so they love that. They just wish it was easier for people to understand. But I don't do the slot machines. Man, I just go to the sports book because I'm great at that. Not really. I just go walk down the strip and go to the M&M store. I'm really good at that when I'm in Las Vegas. All right, let's talk about the SEC meetings, Chip Patterson. We could talk about casino games all day long. Nick Saban has no problem with Jimbo Fisher. Has anybody asked that question of Jimbo Fisher?
Well, Kirby Smart told us that was, Mickey Mouse stuff compared to what you used to hear on the headsets. Kirby Smart said, it just sounded like the same conversations that we had back in the coaches' meeting rooms. It's very funny. So Jimbo Fisher, for the record, is not going to have a scheduled media availability. Right. If anybody gets Jimbo to talk on this, it is, flagging him down amidst his bodyguards in the lobby and getting him to speak on it, which I wouldn't put a high percentage chance on. But we have heard from Shane Beamer. We have heard from Billy Napier. We've heard from Eli Drinkwitz. We've heard from Nick Saban, as you mentioned, and Kirby Smart. And the thing that has stood out to me was, number one, what Kirby said is like, yeah, that's how some of us talked about each other and to each other. And that number two, it does seem like a lot of these. Oh, Lane Kiffin has also spoken, and he said that when they actually got together in the room, it was pretty tame. Sure. And he said it reminded him of how everyone is way bolder when they're texting than when they're in person. And
or said, Twitter, right? Twitter.
That's what happens when you get in front of the microphone. Like for college football coaches, getting in front of the cameras with the microphone at that little table with the logo behind you, they feel as emboldened as an anonymous troll on Twitter. And they got their name in front of it and everything. So I think that right now we have discovered that Jimbo Fisher and Nick Saban, while they shared time together, might have even been butting heads back at LSU when Jimbo Fisher wanted to have a more innovative offense and Nick Saban just wanted to win with defense.
Right.
And that this has just kind of been a long-running, somewhat respectful, back and forth where, and I think that you and I mentioned this last week, Jimbo Fisher ultimately has a huge ego about his recruiting prowess. Sure. He was an excellent recruiter at Florida State. He believes that he has assembled a great recruiting machine. And every single time that somebody says Texas A&M bought that player, bought that class, the only reason why Texas A&M got the number one class in the country is because of all this NIL and everybody they bought. That is attacking Jimbo Fisher's ego.
Sure.
And we are seeing that ego get very, very, very defensive.
So Nick Saban also said yesterday that he shouldn't have mentioned a specific school. Well, he mentioned two because he also attacked Jackson State, which, again, I'm not sure why you beefed down. But his message, which was supposed to be like on the Alabama rubber chicken circuit anyway, but his message would not have been effective if he didn't mention Texas A&M. We finished second because the team that finished first, which happened to be Texas A&M, they bought their entire recruiting class. Of course he had to mention the school, otherwise people wouldn't have known what he was talking about.
Well, he had to also, tell his crew, like, hey, listen, somebody else is doing this as well as we do it. And that means we can't be using the old operating system. I mean, that was him saying, like, we have latency speeds. We need to beef this thing up. We need to figure out what we need to do to improve our operation, because the recruiting machine that Alabama was running was not challenged. I mean, it was something like 5 out of 6 years they had the number one class. The only time that they didn't, it was like Georgia flipped up there for a season and Alabama was still up in the top 5.
Right.
I think that Nick Saban sees in this new era a lot of the advantages that he has been able to create with the heavy investment in support staff, with the heavy investment in evaluators, with everything that he's been able to build around this whole organization and industrial college football machine. Now, with collectives and with the ability for those collectives to mobilize and create inducements or not create inducements. Shout out to everybody watching this on television, because that's against NCAA rules.
Right.
Now, there all of a sudden are a lot more players that are going to be able to operate at that high level. I mean, look, Josh Heupel did not all of a sudden start becoming one of the best recruiters in the SEC. Josh Heupel used to be at UCF. He's the head coach at Tennessee right now. And guess what? Tennessee's been crushing it on the recruiting trail.
Right.
I don't think that's because of Josh Heupel. I think that's because Tennessee has a lot of passionate and well-funded boosters who have put together a very organized collective. And I think that ultimately, for those programs that have always had those donors, who've always had those boosters, now it really is about organization. And this is something that, I'm really starting to get into and think that is at the core of coaches complaining. I think that coaches are concerned that the balance of power in recruiting is shifting away from the coaches and to the collectives, and they are worried about losing that control because of the power that the NIL has over the recruiting efforts, not to mention like the Jimbo Fisher angle to this, that they are now being discounted as not being as good at what they do as they were in the previous world.
It really is. It's the scene from Blue Chips all over again. It's the movie Blue Chips is now, this is life imitating art as opposed to the other way around, because the scene from Blue Chips when Nick Nolte is telling the big booster to go kick rocks, the booster's like, we do this, we do this, we do this. This is the reason why you get to do this. And like, you know what? This is really what is about to be the norm. I think Nick Saban doesn't like the fact that the rules are changing right around him, and maybe he didn't see it coming. Maybe Alabama thought, maybe it was a little bit of arrogance that they thought it would just be business as usual. And ultimately, I think Alabama will catch back up, and then we'll get back to the same place we were maybe 5 years ago, where ultimately the goal is to get to the National Football League. So the long-term money and the long-term impact is the better. And it's like investing. The long-term ideas are the better ones. And ultimately, wherever you get to go to the NFL and be the most successful is the place you're going to go, which probably Alabama and Ohio State and some other places. What's the fallout from this? And I said back the first time when Greg Sankey sent out the memo publicly reprimanding both coaches, I said, why would you even sully the memo with an SEC bylaw? Why don't you just say, kids, keep it in the sandbox? Because basically you had two adults acting like children. What is the fallout from something like this?
Not much, because I do think that what we've seen from Destin has been not only Nick Saban, but all the SEC coaches towing the line, coming up with analogies. They asked Eli Drinkwitz about the back and forth, and he came back with a story about not getting enough cotton candy for his two kids.
What's the difference?
I think that there's not much fallout here, but here it does bring me back to Mike Slive, who I do credit for a lot of leading the charge in leading the SEC to the top of college football. And one of the things that Mike Slive did is he got all these schools together and he told them stop telling on each other. He said, look, we are getting nowhere as a conference when we have a premier institution on probation or under sanctions every other year. I mean, you can go and look at a lot of the high-profile NCAA cases. There's a point where, whether it was Auburn, whether it was Alabama, there was a SEC program that was dealing with some kind of NCAA issues almost every season, and then it stopped.
Yeah.
And it stopped because he was able to convince all those coaches and all those athletic directors that we are not going to be helping ourselves at all if we start snapping at each other, telling on ourselves, running off to the media, even if it's not in public, but running off to the media and giving the wink, wink, nod, nod, go check this out.
Right.
And that agreement has helped the SEC competitively in a very big way. And I didn't look up what those bylaws were. But him dropping that 13.4.2,
whatever,
all it said to me was like, hey, remember what Mike Slive, put in place that was able to help us get here. And it's that we're not bringing all this dirty laundry out in public. These are conversations that might be happening behind closed doors or on text threads,
right.
But I do think that we are not going to see much fallout to your earlier question because everybody's kind of been brought back in line.
Yeah, it's really bylaw 54 point something million dollars. That's the byline. They're distributing so much revenue. All right, so fascinating stuff for me. And I mentioned this at the end of the last hour, because of course it's football, so everybody's going to have college football playoff expansion, and Greg Sankey offered this. Like, we don't know where we are. We're still talking about it. But somebody had mentioned 8, and Greg Sankey said, our position has been 8 is fine, all at-large spots. I mean, I'm against expansion, but if you're going to go to 8, I think that's the way to do it. Am I crazy?
No, I just don't know how realistic it is to get everybody else on board with 8 without any guaranteed spots for conference champions. Like at that point, we might just end up staying at 4 for another contract.
Right.
The idea,
which I'm okay with.
The idea of doing 8 with, because it seems very it's like fantasy. It's somebody who does it, and I don't want to like knock any listener or any viewer, but to say like, hey, what seems fair to me is if we have an 8-team playoff, we have 5 group of 5 champions, 5 Power 5 champions, 1 from the group of 5, and 2 at-large bids. They're like wild cards. It makes sense. It's like the NFL, and it's like, well, that's not the best playoff.
No,
those aren't the best teams. You are taking number 14 or number 16,
correct,
and you are scooting them up over teams that are going to be highly rated. And that's why I think it's a no. SEC with Greg Sankey leading the effort on expansion is never going to support an 8-team playoff like that, because while it might seem fair, it is not going to be representative of the best teams in college football, because it will be leaving out multiple teams from the SEC if you go to that model. So an 8-team with all at-large bids, like, sure. I mean, that is basically just doubling the model that we have right now. What the ACC, the Big Ten, and the Pac-12, remember the alliance is not a scheduling agreement. It is a caucus.
Right.
Whatever the caucus decides that they want to take on this is going to influence whether or not we even move off of 4, even as we move into the new contract, because an 8-team all at large is, I'm sure, something that the SEC would support, because in many years it would involve 3, if not 4 SEC teams.
I'm not so sure that's true. But I mean, maybe it is, but I also don't care. I said at the beginning of 4 that if all 4 teams came from the Southeastern Conference, I'd be okay with that. Because to me, if you're going to have a playoff, then you want the best teams. We could parse best versus most deserving. I say the 2 things are the same, because what you did and who you did it against will tell us who the best teams are. And in general, that'll mirror the most deserving. So I have no... If all 8 came from the SEC, I wouldn't care. Because if we're going to have it, the only way to do it is to do it right. And worried about somebody's feelings is not the way to do it right. And if I'm I'm a pro ACC guy, and we're going to talk about the ACC in the next segment. If the ACC champion, and Dennis had mentioned that, Pitt wouldn't have been in the top 8 last year. I don't even remember last year. So, okay, so let's say they weren't in the top 8. Oh, well. The whole thing about the playoff is to get the 8 best teams. I don't care. And I'm a pro ACC guy. Whatever is best for the ACC, I'm a fan of, but I'm not in this case. I want the best teams. Why is that crazy?
Now, if I'm in charge of the playoff, if I am owning the playoff rights, or if I am the executive director of the playoff, I do want to have feelings, and I do want to have hope, because you know what that does? That's eyeballs.
Sure.
It keeps you invested. That has you checking in on all of the different updates and all of the different projected brackets. I want to involve the entire country, and I want to cast as big a net as possible in terms of being able to generate interest. And so that's why, some of the interesting things that have come out of this is Greg Sankey telling athletic directors in the SEC to completely rethink everything about how the SEC decides its champion, to completely rethink everything about what the future is going to be. And you know what I hear when I hear that? They are hearing from television executives, we're throw everything out the window if we need to. What will fill up the content calendar in December and January, create the biggest stage, and generate the most interest for the sport of college football? Is that an SEC only playoff? I don't know. We're in the no bad ideas portion of this brainstorming. Does that involve an 8-team that large? Is it the 12-team model that we already agreed on? I don't know. What is the NFL's decision to move around the playoffs? How does that impact our national championship game? I have just really come to learn, the more and more I dig into this, that we are going to see at the end of this 12-year run of the 4-team college football playoff, at least right now, the opportunity to completely rebuild the postseason and the way that college football is put on display for its fans in the months of December and January. And I don't know which way it's going to go, but it does at least offer a little bit of excitement to try and consider how it might look when we get to 2026.
Like opening up presents on Christmas morning. Chip Patterson, as always, Cover 3 podcast.